Dr. Alexandra, Doc, Marshall always found it amusing that her old friends continued calling her Doc, even in the most formal settings. Ever since she was a child prodigy in medical school, people had used the nickname more often than her real name. Now, she was on the frontier of interstellar exploration with the official title of Lieutenant Commander and Chief Medical Officer for the Federation Expeditionary Corps, yet Doc was all anyone called her. As her landing craft descended toward the orange-hued planet's surface, she stared through the viewport, feeling butterflies in her stomach. This was the day everything would change for her entire team, though none of them realized it yet. They were about to encounter the mysterious SSAlan, an alien species with an entirely distinct cultural approach to rank, title, and authority. When the Federation had first heard rumors of advanced settlements on this world, they sent Doc and a small crew led by Captain Wilcox, a stern but honorable officer, to initiate peaceful contact. Their orders were simple: land in an unpopulated area, set up a small base, and wait for the SSAlan to come to them. Yet the complexities of first contact often defied scripted orders. For Doc, the excitement eclipsed her nerves, but she couldn't help thinking about the stories told by older officers who had braved new worlds. In some cases, the locals had perceived them as gods, in others, as threats to be fought off. The possibilities stretched far beyond standard Federation protocols. Captain Wilcox, standing at the front of the craft's passenger compartment, belted out final instructions for their landing procedure. Doc barely listened, trusting she could recite them in her sleep. Instead, she scanned the faces of her fellow explorers: Lieutenant Vega the linguist, Sergeant O'Connor the security specialist, Corporal Davies the engineer, and Private Decker, their rookie. Each looked eager, but none exuded quite the same restless energy Doc felt. She might have been the medical officer, but the unknown thrilled her just as much as patching up battlefield injuries ever had. The craft's metal skids touched the dusty ground. A hiss of hydraulics signaled the ramp descending, letting the planet's strange, dry air swirl inside. Immediately, the scanners beeped with data: standard oxygen-nitrogen atmosphere, only slightly different from Earth's. It was safe enough, so they removed their helmets. No one spoke much, letting each footstep crunch on the strange orange gravel as they moved down the ramp and established a perimeter. Captain Wilcox led the team forward, while Doc carried her advanced portable medical scanner. The moment she stepped onto the planet's surface, she felt a small thrill run through her, a surge of possibility and anticipation. Yet in the next few hours, things moved slowly. The group set up a rudimentary base, a cluster of modular tents, communications relay, atmospheric analyzers. Doc assisted with calibrating the scanners, verifying no immediate danger existed. She took soil and air samples, scanning for microbial life. There were some, but nothing obviously hazardous. Gradually, the sun dipped toward the horizon, painting the sky in vibrant shades of orange and purple. The wind picked up, carrying with it faint, rhythmic humming noises that Decker, armed with binoculars, swore resembled the chanting of some distant group. Everyone remained on high alert for potential visitors, but by nightfall, they still hadn't seen so much as a silhouette on the horizon. A small part of Doc felt both disappointed and relieved. After a day of scanning and setting up, she retreated to her bunk within the main tent, trying to rest before daybreak. Sleep came in fits, accompanied by vivid dreams of unusual beings greeting them with complicated ceremonies. She dreamed of stepping forward to greet them and inadvertently triggering intergalactic conflict. She dreamt of standing on a dais, addressed by thousands of alien throats chanting. When she awoke, her heart pounded from the surreal images. She dismissed them as mere illusions, never imagining how close to reality her dreams would soon become. Morning arrived, and with it came a swirl of dust across the landscape. Clouds tinted a soft lavender color dotted the sky, and the temperature rose to a comfortable level that hinted at midday heat soon to come. Doc joined the others for breakfast, a brief break from the tension of waiting for the unknown. Sergeant O'Connor observed the horizon through his scope, scanning for any movement. Private Decker fiddled nervously with an unlit cigarette, abiding by regulation but clearly yearning for a calmer time. Corporal Davies ran a systems check on the communications array, ensuring they could still call for backup if needed. Lieutenant Vega reviewed her alien linguistics database, readying to interpret possible greetings or warnings. Wilcox, stoic as always, paced around the base perimeter, occasionally stopping to consider vantage points. During a lull, he pulled Doc aside, remarking that the presence of a highly trained medical officer was crucial for goodwill. If the SSALAN were like many advanced species, they valued healing as a sign of benevolence. He tasked her with preparing a small gesture of medical assistance, like an emergency kit or a demonstration of skill, if the aliens showed peaceful intentions. Doc noted his orders, but inside, she felt a swirl of excitement. She liked feeling involved in more than just patching wounds. Bridging gaps between species was a rare, honorable task. Around midday, the dust-laden wind abruptly shifted, revealing movement in the distance. The watchers first noticed a line of shapes coalescing on the horizon. As the shapes drew closer, details emerged: a group of slender, tall aliens with elongated limbs, wearing flowing garments that danced with each breeze. Their skin was a pale silvery color, reflective in the sunlight. They seemed to move in perfect unison, guided by an unseen beat. The watchers in the human camp were transfixed by the mesmerizing approach. Nobody panicked. Captain Wilcox calmly reminded everyone of their training: approach with open hands, no sudden movements, wait for them to initiate contact. The aliens stopped a short distance away. One stepped forward, carrying a staff carved from some crystalline material that caught the light in spectacular flashes. Lieutenant Vega tried a standard greeting in the Federation's trade tongue. At first, the aliens only cocked their heads, the staff-bearer tapping the ground as if to test the sound. Then, with surprising eloquence, it spoke in halting but understandable words. "We are the SSALAN. We see you, visitors from beyond. We come in peace." Relief washed over the humans. Vega exchanged a few more phrases, clarifying that they too came peacefully. The staff-bearer's large black eyes scanned each of them, apparently searching for clues about hierarchy or intention. The other SSALAN did the same, stepping forward, heads bowed slightly. When the staff-bearer spoke again, the words were clearly directed at Document. "You are, Doc. We have studied your transmissions." Doc was taken aback, uncertain how or why they specifically addressed her. Wilcox quickly identified himself as Captain Wilcox, commanding officer, but the staff-bearer's gaze remained fixed on Document. An uneasy silence lingered. Doc felt confusion dance across her mind, but she managed a warm smile, nodding politely. "Yes, I'm called Document." The SSALAN seemed to exchange glances amongst themselves, then all bowed more deeply. Wilcox tried to clarify, "I'm the leader. She is our medical officer." The staff-bearer tilted its head, as if perplexed by the notion. "Her name is, Doc. That is your highest name for wise leadership." Suddenly, an uneasy realization blossomed: the aliens had misinterpreted Doc as some esteemed leadership rank. No matter how Wilcox tried to clarify, they continued addressing questions to Document. The SSALAN offered them safe passage to a settlement, inviting them to witness ceremonies that welcomed new alliances. Though it went against typical protocol to let the captain be overlooked, Wilcox recognized that forging trust was paramount. He motioned for Doc to go forward. Reluctantly, she complied, greeting the staff-bearer with the same respectful bow. Inside, her thoughts tumbled. This was bizarre, but maybe it was an opportunity to build rapport. If they believed her to be a high leader of some sort, perhaps it would open diplomatic doors. Nevertheless, Captain Wilcox and the others accompanied her into the dusty plains, following the SSALAN entourage. As they ventured closer to the alien structures, they noticed how advanced the architecture was. Towering spires of metallic alloys that caught the sun, expansive walkways with patterns etched into the ground. All around, SSALAN watchers peered at the newcomers, whispering excitedly in their musical language. The staff-bearer guided them through a wide archway into something reminiscent of a grand plaza, perhaps a civic or religious center. There, more SSALAN gathered, forming semicircles around tall pillars. A hush fell over the crowd as the staff-bearer led Doc, specifically, to the central platform. Wilcox and the rest lingered a few steps behind, unsure of their roles. Doc, with her heart pounding, tried to keep her composure. In a resonant voice, the staff-bearer addressed the assembly, speaking in the SSALAN tongue. Lieutenant Vega whispered a rough translation, "We welcome the great Doc, supreme guide and caretaker from beyond the stars, who shall advise us in health and strategy." Doc's eyes widened. She tried to interject, but the staff-bearer continued, extolling what the SSALAN believed to be her rank and divine knowledge. The crowd erupted in what seemed like applause, soft tapping noises of their elongated fingers striking their chests. Captain Wilcox looked both astonished and dismayed. Sergeant O'Connor muttered curses under his breath, while Vega just blinked, at a loss for words. Doc managed to say, "We come in peace, to share knowledge, to help," hoping that partial truths might ease the misunderstanding. But the staff-bearer insisted they had waited for a true Doc for many cycles, referencing ancient prophecies about a wise teacher from another realm. The humans exchanged glances, struggling to figure out how to proceed. Should they correct the aliens and risk insulting them? Should they play along? Wilcox tried again to assert that he was the official expedition leader, but the SSALAN politely brushed him off, always returning to document. Eventually, the staff-bearer escorted the entire team to a spacious hall within a towering building. The interior shimmered with intricate metal inlays, swirling patterns on the walls, and a high, vaulted ceiling. There, the humans were offered refreshment, bowls of translucent liquid that Doc's scanner confirmed were non-toxic and even nutrient-rich. The staff-bearer and other dignitaries pressed upon Doc their many inquiries: how to cure local diseases, how to strengthen defenses, and how to maintain order among the SSALAN people. Despite her repeated attempts to clarify her position, she was just a medical officer, not a grand overlord. SSALAN insisted that was exactly the point. They claimed that Doc indicated someone whose wisdom spanned life and death, a caretaker of physical and spiritual well-being, someone whose counsel shaped societies. The more she demurred, the more they seemed to revere her humility. Wilcox, simmering with frustration, decided a private debrief was necessary. He signaled the staff-bearer for a recess, which was graciously granted. The humans retreated to a side chamber, where the door slid shut, leaving them in relative solitude. Captain Wilcox's jaw muscles flexed visibly. "All right, we've got a situation," he said flatly. "They think Doc here is some supreme authority. We can't undermine that without risking their goodwill." Vega nodded. Their worldview probably places healers at the top of their social hierarchy. In many cultures, doctors are revered, but this is on another level. They clearly read or translated our earlier broadcasts and fixated on her nickname. Doc rubbed her temples, feeling a headache building. "This is insane. I'm not qualified to lead any negotiations." "You are, Captain." Wilcox exhaled. "But they won't talk to me. If we try to force the issue, we might lose the best chance for peaceful relations." Doc recognized his point. She was not a diplomat or a strategist, yet she might be forced into that role. Sergeant O'Connor shrugged. "Can't we just, I dunno, roll with it for a bit? We secure trust, find out what they want, and maybe we can clarify things gradually." Private Decker piped up, "It's not like we have other options. If they're set on Doc being top dog, we either accept their custom or risk insulting them." Doc felt her heart flutter with anxiety. She had always believed in practicing medicine with empathy and humility. Now, ironically, that humility could be interpreted as her greatest virtue in the eyes of the SSALAN, fueling their belief in her near-divine status. "Fine," she said quietly. I'll do my best to keep the peace. But we need to be careful. We mustn't make promises we can't keep. And Captain, I'll need your guidance in the background. Wilcox placed a reassuring hand on her shoulder. Of course. Just do what you do best, show compassion. We'll manage the rest. With that tentative plan, they returned to the main hall, where the staff-bearer awaited with a group of SSA land elders. Immediately, the staff-bearer bowed deeply to document, Great Doc, we wish to show you our city, so that you might guide our future. Doc swallowed hard. We thank you for this honor, she said slowly, trying to keep her voice steady. In our culture, we share leadership duties. My companion, Captain Wilcox, is also very important. I ask that you allow him to advise me as well. A faint flicker crossed the staff-bearer's eyes. Yes, great document. We will respect your subordinate, if you wish. The captain's lips twitched. He said nothing, but Doc could sense his annoyance. Nonetheless, he nodded in acceptance. The SSLN led them through winding streets of their city, passing curious onlookers. Everywhere, the word Doc passed alien lips in hushed reverence. The aliens demonstrated agricultural terraces built onto the spires, advanced water recycling systems that gleaned precious moisture from the atmosphere, and a series of humming power generators that harnessed geothermal energy from beneath the planet's crust. Doc was impressed by their technical sophistication, though she suspected their medical knowledge might lag behind, given how fervently they believed in an otherworldly savior. True enough, as the tour concluded, the staff-bearer brought them to a grand hall dedicated to healing. Inside, cots lined the walls, each bearing a SSLN in various states of illness. The staff-bearer's voice trembled with worry. Our people suffer from a plague that resists our remedies. We pray you, Great Doc, bring your healing powers here. We have lost many, please save the rest. The sudden responsibility felt immense, pressing down on her. She placed a hand on her portable scanner, glancing back at Captain Wilcox, who gave a subtle nod of encouragement. Approaching the nearest cot, Doc gently examined a frail SSALN with trembling limbs and labored breathing. She activated her scanner, running a diagnostic sweep. The device flashed with readouts, a complex pathogen mutated from a local fungus, interacting with the SSALN's unique physiology to create a systemic infection. The SSALN's medics offered her samples of their herbal concoctions, which she tested as well. They had some partial antibiotic properties but were insufficient for the advanced stage of infection. Doc rummaged in her medical kit, searching for a broad-spectrum antiviral fungal medication. She found a few vials that might be effective if adapted to SSALN biology. Carefully, she used her scanner to modify the dosage for the alien patient's metabolism. Holding her breath, she administered a small dose. The patient's breathing eased almost immediately. A hush fell over the entire hall, as if the air itself stilled in reverence. The staff-bearers' wide eyes shone with awe, and the alien medics chittered excitedly in their own language. The staff-bearer raised his arms, addressing the assembled watchers. The prophecy holds true. The Great Doc has come to banish disease. A chorus of alien voices rose in celebration, tapping their chests in that distinctive gesture of applause. Doc felt both a surge of pride and a pit of anxiety in her stomach. She had simply administered a standard medication, but the SSALN saw it as a miracle. Turning to Captain Wilcox, she caught a flicker of concern in his eyes. He looked at her as if to say, "This is getting bigger than we realized." The staff-bearer beckoned her forward. "Great Doc, can you produce more of this cure? There are many who suffer, scattered across our domain." She glanced at her limited supply of meds. She had enough to treat a small group, but not a citywide plague. However, with time, she could synthesize more if she had the right equipment. She felt the weight of the entire civilization's hopes pressing on her. "I can," she began softly, "but I need the proper facilities. We must work together to share knowledge of your biology, so we can produce this medicine effectively. The staff-bearer bowed so deeply his forehead nearly touched the ground. We will grant you anything, great document. Our entire science hall is yours. By the time the humans returned to their makeshift camp that night, Doc felt mentally and physically drained. She'd been hailed as a messiah, asked to cure a plague, and treated as some supreme leader by an entire species. Wilcox dismissed everyone for rest but asked Doc to stay behind to discuss strategy with him, Vega, and O'Connor. Over the glow of a small lamp, Wilcox laid out the situation. We've got an entire planet's population believing Doc is their top authority. That gives us immense diplomatic leverage. But it also means we have huge responsibilities. We're not here to conquer or exploit, we're here to build trust and alliances. We must tread carefully. Vega chimed in, agreed. My biggest fear is what happens if we can't deliver on every demand they place at Doc's feet. Their faith might turn to anger. Also, we must consider how the Federation will view this. They might see it as interfering in a pre-existing culture if we don't handle it correctly. Sergeant O'Connor nodded. Still, the plague is real. People are dying. Doc, you're their best shot right now. Let's focus on saving lives first. Doc sighed. I'll do everything I can. But synthesizing a large supply of medication requires specialized apparatus. We'll need to bring in more resources from orbit, or build a lab here. Meanwhile, the SSALAN might keep expecting me to solve everything from politics to infrastructure. Wilcox agreed. We'll request more supplies from the Federation ship above. In the meantime, keep fulfilling their medical expectations. Let's not promise anything beyond that. We'll also keep clarifying that you rely on the entire team's expertise. Doc shook her head sadly. They might hear it, but they won't necessarily believe it. They're convinced my rank is second to none. With that, they concluded the night's meeting. Lying in her bunk, Doc stared at the tent ceiling, wondering how she had found herself in this bizarre predicament. She wanted to help, that was her calling. Yet the illusions the SSALAN held about her rank and power loomed large. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, and new hopes. Dawn came swiftly, and before she had time to sip her morning coffee, a delegation of SSALAN arrived at the human camp, their elongated limbs skittering across the dusty ground. They bowed deeply to Doc, ignoring everyone else. The staff-bearer, accompanied by half a dozen officials wearing ornate sashes, explained that they had prepared a holy laboratory for her work. Doc was ushered to a SSALAN transport vehicle, an anti-gravity platform that hovered a meter above the ground. The rest of the team followed on foot, or aboard another transport. In the city, the so-called Holy Laboratory was indeed a large facility with advanced research tools, an unexpected blend of biology, chemistry, and technology shaped by the SSALAN's unique methods. Strange, crystalline structures acted as growth media for certain fungal experiments. The staff-bearer proudly presented it all, eyes gleaming. We gathered our best minds here, great Doc, to serve you. Indeed, dozens of SSALAN scientists watched anxiously, waiting for instructions. Doc, slightly overwhelmed, approached the main console. Lieutenant Vega had come along to assist with translation, bridging language gaps in the more complex technical discussions. Corporal Davies joined to see if the city's power grid could handle the equipment they'd set up. Meanwhile, Sergeant O'Connor hovered protectively, scanning the area with stoic vigilance. The rest of the SSALAN parted respectfully whenever Doc walked past. She delved into the existing SSALAN research on the plague, which they called Wrath-Gal. Over the past few years, it had decimated pockets of their population, especially in outlying settlements. They'd tried everything, herbal concoctions, energy-based treatments, prayer ceremonies, but the fungal pathogen mutated faster than they could adapt. Her scanner had identified the pathogen's structure as something modern Federation medicine could likely handle. However, mass-producing the cure wasn't trivial. She needed to replicate her broad-spectrum formula, adjust it for SSA-land physiology, and test for side effects. Fortunately, the lab had more advanced equipment than she'd anticipated. The challenge would be synthesizing enough doses for large-scale deployment. She spent the entire day working side by side with SSA-land scientists, teaching them how to calibrate the instruments. Now and then, she felt guilty when they called her Great Doc, but the pressing urgency of the plague overshadowed her discomfort. Captain Wilcox checked in via comlink, giving updates on additional supplies that the orbiting Federation ship could deliver. Meanwhile, the SSA-land staff-bearer insisted on introducing Doc to various city leaders, who each made different pleas. One asked for her blessing for a major civic project. Another wanted her guidance on a border dispute with a rival city-state. Yet another wanted to consult her on philosophical matters of life and death. With each request, Doc politely referred them to local experts or stated that her priority was curing Rathgal. Some leaders accepted this. Others seemed puzzled that she wasn't instantly offering judgments, as if a final arbiter of every facet of SSA-land life. By late evening, she finally had a moment to herself, locked away in a small side office. She slumped against a wall, trying to catch her breath. Vega found her there, exhausted, scanning a tablet of lab results. "They're wearing you down," Vega remarked gently. "You did great today, though. We've made huge progress on the cure, and the SSA-land scientists are learning quickly." Doc rubbed her eyes. "I just wish they didn't expect me to solve everything. Do you think they'll realize I'm not omnipotent once we hand them the cure?" Vega shrugged. "Cultural assumptions can be stubborn. We'll keep trying to show them it's a team effort." Before Doc could respond, the staff-bearer knocked softly and entered, face drawn with concern. "Great Doc, urgent news. A small settlement, Tehale, is being ravaged by Rathgal. They beg your immediate help. We have a transport prepared." Doc looked to Vega, who nodded in commiseration. With no rest in sight, Doc rose to her feet, gathered her portable supplies, and followed the staff-bearer. They soared across the night sky in an aerial vehicle, SSA-land technology allowing them swift travel across the desert. The journey took an hour, and all the while, Doc tried to mentally prepare. When they arrived, the sight was grim. The settlement was smaller and more primitive than the main city, its structures weathered by sandstorms, roads barely maintained. Desperate SSA-land crowded around, some so weak they could hardly stand. The staff-bearer guided Doc to a communal hall where dozens of infected lay on reed mats. The air was thick with the acrid smell of fever and decay. Wasting no time, Doc opened her medical kit and set up triage. She took samples, checked vital signs, dispensed the carefully rationed doses she'd managed to produce earlier that day, instructing local medics on how to administer them. Some patients were too far gone, she could only ease their pain. For the rest, she held on to hope that her medication could halt the progression. Throughout the night, she worked tirelessly. SSA-land families knelt at her feet, sobbing, thanking her, praying for her blessing. The psychological toll weighed heavily on Doc's shoulders. She'd faced tough medical crises before but never under the expectation of being a near-divine figure. The staff-bearer eventually coaxed her to a small room for rest. The metal walls glowed faintly from an embedded energy source, casting eerie shadows. She sank onto a low bench, physically and emotionally drained. Just as she closed her eyes, her comm unit crackled with Wilcox's voice, "Doc, can you hear me?" "Over." She lifted it to her ear, too tired to stand. "Yes, Captain, I'm here in the hull. It's bad." Wilcox's tone was grim. "We have more supplies coming, but it'll take time. I'm proud of you, Document. You're doing amazing work. But remember, you're not alone. We're setting up supply lines. O'Connor and Davies are coordinating with the city. Also, be cautious. We don't know if any SSA-land factions might try to exploit your revered status." Doc rubbed her forehead. Understood, Captain. I'll keep my eyes open. Right now, the biggest threat I see is the plague. She ended the call, letting exhaustion claim her at last. Sleep came fitfully, haunted by images of sick aliens and their pleading eyes. Morning broke with a faint drizzle of precipitation that Doc hadn't realized this planet could produce. The settlement of the Hall looked slightly less bleak in the hazy early light, though the plague's toll remained evident. Doc checked on the patients she'd treated overnight. Some responded well to the medication, giving her hope. Others were stable but still precarious, and a few had slipped away in the dark. With each loss, she felt the weight of the SSA land's faith in her. Outside, a small crowd had gathered, waiting for any sign of her emergence. They kneeled in the sand, chanting prayers in a soft melodic hum. When Doc stepped out, they raised their voices in unison, heads bowed. One older SSA land female, her eyes milky with age, crawled forward and touched Doc's boot with trembling fingers. "We thank you, great Doc," she whispered through cracked lips. Doc gently helped the old woman to her feet. "I'm just a person," she murmured, uncertain how much of her words got through despite the partial language comprehension. The old woman's expression suggested reverence hadn't diminished, but she accepted the gesture of support with tears in her eyes. Soon, the staff-bearer arrived via transport, accompanied by a retinue of local officials. He claimed that they had arranged a formal ceremony to recognize her efforts. Doc bristled at the idea, unwilling to leave the patients. But the staff-bearer insisted it was customary, that the people required a sign of her leadership. Reluctantly, she allowed them to take her to the settlement's central square, where a raised platform of smooth stone formed a makeshift stage. The staff-bearer and local elders convened, singing a low chant as the people gathered in a wide circle. A hush fell. The staff-bearer, speaking in the SSA land language, delivered a passionate tribute. Lieutenant Vega's translation earpiece caught fragments. "Doc, descended from the stars, benevolent caretaker, bringer of cures and justice." The gathered SSA land tapped their chests softly in respectful applause. Then the staff-bearer lifted an ornately carved circlet, made of the same crystalline material as his staff. He placed it gently on Doc's head, declaring her an elder of elders, a revered rank in their society. Cheers erupted, echoing across the dusty square. Doc, feeling awkward, tried to maintain composure. Part of her thought, what if Captain Wilcox sees me wearing this? But there was no time to protest without potentially insulting them. When the ceremony concluded, the crowd dispersed in near-religious ecstasy. The staff-bearer turned to Doc, bowing again. "We must hurry back to the city. Other settlements need your blessing. We will deliver the formula to them when it is ready." Doc nodded, feeling tangled between gratitude for their cooperation and dread at how her perceived status kept escalating. She yearned for a moment to simply be a doctor, unburdened by the illusions of grandeur. Instead, she followed the staff-bearer and boarded the transport once more. That day blurred into the next, and the next. Captain Wilcox made sure the Federation's scientific and medical teams arrived to help ramp up production of the cure. Meanwhile, Doc was whisked from one location to another, bestowing blessings that really amounted to her verifying that local medics were administering dosages properly or checking on specialized cases. Yet with every appearance, her legend grew. Word spread that the human Doc not only brought healing but also wise counsel on social matters. She tried to deflect the latter, telling local leaders they should trust their own traditions. But each attempt at modesty only seemed to intensify their belief in her humility. The Federation command staff back on the orbiting vessel grew concerned, sending messages urging caution about interfering with local governments. Captain Wilcox tried to walk a thin line, praising Doc for the goodwill she'd fostered but cautioning the SSA land not to see the Federation as subservient to her. The staff-bearer's repeated response was, "Your Federation is welcome, but all is under the gracious domain of the Great Document." Eventually, tensions began to stir among the SSA land themselves. Rumors trickled in. Certain factions believed the staff-bearer was wrong to place so much faith in an off-worlder. They argued that the SSA land should chart their own destiny without worshipping an alien. Others insisted that their texts had foretold a foreign leader who would vanquish disease and unify the people. As the cures successfully quelled outbreaks of Rathgal in more settlements, Doc's popularity soared, overshadowing local priests and chieftains who once held authority. She became a lightning rod for both adoration and resentment. Inevitably, conflict erupted. Captain Wilcox's intelligence briefings highlighted a militant splinter group, calling themselves the Pure SSA, who believed relying on an alien's cure showed weakness. They had begun sabotage efforts, dismantling medical shipments and threatening SSA land who cooperated with the humans. A few violent skirmishes flared in remote areas. One evening, after a long day of overseeing distribution of medicine, Doc returned to the main city's guest quarters, a sumptuous suite the staff-bearer had provided. She found Wilcox and Sergeant O'Connor waiting for her. Wilcox's brow was furrowed. "Doc, we've got a serious problem. The Pure SSA sabotaged one of the medical labs, destroying half our stock of crucial ingredients. We suspect they might even attempt an attack here." Sergeant O'Connor's face was stony. "I advise we tighten security around you. Like it or not, you're the prime target. They see you as the symbol of off-world interference." Doc's exhaustion flared into frustration. "All I wanted was to heal people. Now I'm a political figure. This is insane." Wilcox nodded. "I know. But we have to adapt. The staff-bearer is organizing his own guard for you. He's insisting on it, actually. He calls them the Doc's Honor Guard." Doc winced. "Of course he does. All right, I'll accept them if it prevents bloodshed. But we need to find a way to unify these people without my rank overshadowing their own systems. Maybe we can hold a council or something, invite local leaders, prove we're working together as equals." Wilcox rubbed his chin. "A summit of sorts. That might be possible. But we'll need the staff-bearer's cooperation. He still sees you as the ultimate authority." O'Connor stepped forward. "Let's propose a coalition approach to disease control. Let the SSA land themselves take the lead, with Doc and her team advising. Show everyone this cure belongs to them, not just to an alien goddess figure." Doc mustered a faint smile. "Yes, that's good. If we can demonstrate a collaborative model, maybe we can defuse the tensions. Let's do it." The next day, they brought the proposal to the staff-bearer. He listened intently, his expression a curious mix of pride and hesitation. "You wish to share the leadership, Great Doc. This is not how it has been foretold." Doc gently insisted that the SSA land needed to own their future, not place all hope in an outsider. The staff-bearer considered, eventually agreeing to convene a grand council in the city's largest amphitheater. Invitations were sent to every known faction, including the Pure SSA. The staff-bearer believed that a demonstration of unity could persuade the doubters. Over the next few days, the city prepared feverishly for the council. Decorative banners stretched across spires, featuring stylized images of Doc's face, an honor that made her uneasy. The amphitheater's massive stone seats filled with robed elders, scientists, priests, merchants, and local chieftains. Even an envoy of the Pure SSA arrived, glowering from a distance. Captain Wilcox and a small contingent of Federation personnel flanked Doc, providing silent support. When the staff-bearer led Doc into the amphitheater, a hush rippled across the crowd. Thousands of SSA-land eyes fixated on her, the Great Doc. Doc's heart hammered, but she strode forward with as much composure as she could muster, wearing a modified uniform that included the crystalline circlet. The staff-bearer opened the assembly with a sweeping speech, extolling Doc's role in saving many from Rathgal. Then he yielded the platform to her. Doc stepped to the center, voice resonating through the amphitheater's acoustics. "People of the SSA land, she began gently, I am honored by your trust and gratitude. My team and I came here to offer assistance and learn from you in turn. Yet I must clarify, I alone cannot guide your entire future. The cure belongs to you. It is the result of your scientists, your resources, and your determination to save lives. A murmur swelled through the crowd. She continued, we ask you to form a council of your brightest minds, your wisest elders, and your bravest leaders. Let us work together, as partners, to protect your people. Your ways should remain yours. I do not wish to rule, I wish to serve. Some nodded in agreement, while others looked uncertain. In the stands, a representative of the pure SSA rose, pointing a bony finger. Your words are sweet, but we see how you overshadow our own traditions. You claim to serve, yet you are worshipped like a goddess. This is a contradiction. Doc bowed her head humbly. You are right to question. I ask you to see the truth in my actions. I never claimed divinity or absolute rule. I offered medicine to those who needed it, just as any true caretaker would. Another voice rose, a local farmer, but you did cure thousands. If you were not meant to lead us, why then does the plague yield to your skill? Doc scanned the crowd, searching for the right words. On my world, she said softly, physicians dedicate themselves to healing. We have technology, knowledge, and yes, some skill. But that doesn't make us all powerful. Your own scientists and medics have worked alongside me. Together, we overcame the plague. My hope is that we share this knowledge freely, so nobody depends on just one person. Suddenly, from behind the stands, a commotion arose. A group of pure SSA militants pushed forward, brandishing slender energy weapons. Screams erupted as they fired a few warning shots into the air, sizzling pulses that crackled overhead. Sergeant O'Connor and Federation security snapped into action, moving to intercept. The staff-bearer cried out, "Protect the great Doc." But Doc moved quickly, pushing past the staff-bearer before he could stop her. She raised her hands toward the militants. "Please, no violence," she yelled, though her heart drummed in fear. One militant snarled, "We reject your false leadership. You bring foreign meddling into our society." In the midst of the chaos, Captain Wilcox and the human security detail flanked Doc, weapons at the ready. The staff-bearer's own guards, brandishing ceremonial spears that crackled with energy fields, advanced on the pure SSA. Tension mounted. Doc feared a massacre. She inhaled sharply, stepping forward, ignoring Wilcox's protests. "Wait," she called out. "If you truly despise me, let me speak to you first. Let me explain that we came here not to conquer but to help. If you still reject us afterward, then at least you'll have heard the full truth." The militant leader hesitated, weapon quivering. The amphitheater fell silent. Finally, the leader spat, "Speak, then." Doc, voice trembling but resolute, addressed them and the entire crowd. "We humans have faced countless threats on our journey across the stars. We survived only by standing together. We share knowledge, we heal each other, and we recognize that no one person can carry an entire civilization. You fear that I undermine your traditions, but I believe your traditions can adapt and grow. The cure we bought is not magic. It's science, something you yourselves can master, provided we work together. I don't want worship, I want partnership." Her words echoed off the stone walls. A hush settled as the pure SSA militants exchanged uncertain glances. Meanwhile, thousands of SSA-lan watched, holding their breath. Then, in a move that startled everyone, the militant leader lowered his weapon. "If you seek partnership," he said, voice still laced with distrust, "show us how to make this cure ourselves. Prove you are not trying to enslave us with your knowledge." Doc felt relief flood through her. "Yes," she said with a relieved smile. "That's exactly what we're here to do." The staff-bearer stepped forward, hands lifted, voice trembling with emotion. The great Doc has already invited all to share knowledge. Let us put aside fear and pride. Let us, as she says, move forward together. The amphitheater erupted in applause, some cautious, some jubilant. The tension gradually eased. Federation security escorted the militants away to talk further rather than arrest them outright. Doc felt the circlet on her head grow almost unbearably heavy, symbolizing a burden she never sought. Yet for the first time, she sensed the possibility of finding a balance, of guiding the SSA land toward a healthier future without imposing absolute authority over them. Over the following weeks, a new council formed. It included the staff-bearer, local elders, some of the most influential priests, scientists, and, importantly, representatives who had aligned with the pure SSA. Doc and her Federation colleagues served as advisors. Work began to build dedicated medical production facilities across the continent, training local SSA land in advanced techniques to synthesize the cure. The plague gradually subsided. More importantly, the seeds were planted for a more unified SSA land society. At times, misunderstandings arose. Some SSA land still insisted Doc was a divine figure who had chosen to bestow her gift. Others tried to politicize her presence for their own gain. But each day, the illusions around her unstoppable power eroded a bit, replaced by respect for her genuine medical expertise and collaborative spirit. Months passed, and soon the Federation Council arrived to review progress. They found a stable relationship forming between humanity and the SSA land, anchored by mutual benefit rather than worship. A grand ceremony was held, not to exalt Doc alone, but to celebrate the official alliance between the SSA land and the Federation. The staff-bearer, now the head of the newly formed SSA land High Council, delivered a speech in the amphitheater that once rang with fear and hostility. This time, it resounded with hope. Captain Wilcox, standing beside Doc, nodded approvingly as he heard the staff-bearer declare, "We stand together as equals, guided by knowledge, compassion, and unity." The great Doc taught us that true leadership is shared by many, and that healing comes from understanding, not force. As the applause washed over them, Wilcox leaned toward Doc, murmuring with a wry grin, "Not exactly how the Federation manual outlines a first contact scenario, but you handled it well, Commander." Doc laughed softly. "It sure wasn't. I guess I was lucky the aliens didn't think Doc meant something else, like an insult." Wilcox smirked. "Or maybe we're just lucky you lived up to the best interpretation of the word. In a way, you really were there, Doc, just not in the sense they originally imagined." The ceremony concluded in a swirl of celebratory chants. Though the circlet remained a symbol of respect, Doc had negotiated to pass it on to a rotating group of council members, turning it into a shared artifact representing knowledge and healing. She watched as the staff-bearer placed it on the head of a revered scientist from the SSA land. The crowd erupted in cheers, signifying a shift from singular reverence to collective leadership. That night, Doc retired to the small bunk in the base's command tent, feeling a measure of peace she hadn't known in months. The plague was nearly eradicated, the SSA land had begun forging a new era of governance, and the Federation's presence was welcomed as an ally, not an idol. Private Decker jokingly asked her if she missed being worshipped. She just rolled her eyes and told him that her happiest moment was stepping away from that pedestal. Medical duties, after all, were challenging enough without divine expectations. In the following days, the Federation prepared to reassign Doc to a new mission now that the crisis was under control. The SSA Land Council petitioned her to stay longer, but she gently declined, explaining that other worlds needed her. The staff-bearer accepted her choice with a solemn bow, expressing undying gratitude. On her final day, the SSA Land organized a modest farewell gathering at the city's spaceport. Counselors, scientists, and children lined up to say goodbye. Families held up signs of gratitude, some bearing stylized hearts and caduceus-like symbols they had adopted to represent healing. The staff-bearer approached with a parting gift, a small, crystal figurine depicting two figures, one SSA-LAN and one human, holding hands. To remember, he said quietly, how you inspired us to find our own strength. Doc felt tears prick her eyes. She thanked him, carefully tucking the figurine into her gear. The shuttle doors hissed open, and she stepped inside with her team. Captain Wilcox gave a final salute to the assembled crowd before the hatch was sealed. As the craft lifted off, Doc gazed through the viewport, watching the city of shimmering spires recede into the golden plains. In her mind, she replayed the weeks of turmoil, the heartbreak of the plague victims, the cultural misunderstandings, the worshipful stares, and the final transformation into genuine cooperation. Every shred of exhaustion was worth it to see an entire people stand on their own feet again. Once they docked with the Federation ship, Doc's first act was to store her medical gear, then lie down in a proper bunk for a full night's sleep. The next morning, she awoke to find messages of congratulations from across the Federation. The official mission report lauded Captain Wilcox's leadership but singled out Lieutenant Commander Alexandra Marshall, known colloquially as Doc, for exemplary service in bridging cultural barriers and saving countless lives. She couldn't help but smile at how ironically official it sounded, given that the entire planet once believed her to be the supreme commander of everything. A few days later, she stood on a deck overlooking Earth from orbit, reflecting on her experiences. She realized that leadership could come in many forms, not just a rank pinned to one's collar or a worshipful chant echoing in an alien amphitheater. True leadership, she learned, was about guiding others toward solutions that empowered everyone. In a sense, Doc had become more than a nickname. It was a testament to her values, empathy, service, and the willingness to shoulder responsibility when it called, even if that responsibility felt impossibly heavy. And so her legend among the SSA-LAN would live on, not as a goddess or conqueror, but as the one who taught them to stand shoulder to shoulder with an off-world stranger, forging a future of mutual respect. For all the challenges, she couldn't help but feel a twinge of pride in that legacy. As the Federation starship left orbit, charting a new course among the stars, Doc looked outward, ready to embrace whatever wonders and hazards the galaxy offered next. In her heart, she would always remain a humble healer, but if fate decreed it, she would again rise to leadership. For sometimes, the best leaders were those who never sought the throne but found themselves occupying it nonetheless when compassion required. And with that, Dr. Alexandra Doc Marshall smiled to herself, steeling her heart for the possibilities that lay ahead. No matter where duty took her, she carried the SSA-LAN's lesson, that a misunderstood rank could become a bridge of hope, if guided by empathy and determination. And in the grand tapestry of cosmic exploration, that was a victory worth cherishing above all else.